Same thing here. Emergency. Unusual economic circumstance combined with an emergency. And when they strike them down, that means he's not going to be doing any more deals. He's not going to be collecting any more money. He's not going to be imposing any more sanctions on our allies like Brazil at 50% in order to help people. And I can tell you with reasonable certainty, although if I'm wrong, I'll come back and tell you, that he's not going to win. One went up to the Court of International Trade, a little understood, little known specialty court, sits in New York.
Trump's tariffs. Illegal. That's already explosive, but here's the part you probably haven't heard. If the courts kill them, some of Trump's friends could be sitting on a goldmine of refunds. In fact, insiders say one powerful official's family was ready to swoop in, buy up claims on the cheap, and pocket the payouts. It's like watching someone throw a party only to rob the guests on the way out. Let's break down the paper trail, the players, and why the timing makes this smell way too convenient. Before we move on, I will like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. The headlines make it sound simple. Trump tariffs under fire. But the real story isn't just about taxes on Chinese imports. It's about power, big money, and maybe some behind-the-scenes moves that would make a poker hustler blush. This isn't just another trade spat on the news ticker. This case decides whether billions go back into the pockets of certain businesses, and whether some people already have their hands out. Here's where things stand. The Court of International Trade already dropped a hammer on a big chunk of Trump's tariffs, saying, nope, you can't just slap these on the way you did. Now the whole mess is sitting in the lap of the US Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. They're basically the referee's referee with the power to either save the tariffs or bury them. If they bury them, the fallout won't be slow. It could all unravel overnight, throwing the government into a scramble to hand out billions in refunds. That's not an exaggeration. Billions.
Well, don't worry about Donald Trump's tariffs much longer, because an 11-judge panel today of the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, I believe, is about to strike them down. 11 judges, and none of them appointed by Donald Trump. I'm going to report on it right here. We had an oral argument for 2 hours today in D.C. on 2 cases related to the attack on Donald Trump's tariffs. And let's get down to the intersection of law, politics, and tariffs. How do we get to this moment? Imposed tariffs. Couple little problems pointed out today in the 11-judge panel.
With a B money that's been collected for years could suddenly have to boomerang back to corporations and importers. Imagine the taxman showing up at your door and saying, actually, here's all your money back plus interest. Now imagine that scenario, except the people getting that magical payday are not random citizens. They're companies who had the cash to fight back, and in some cases, people with the connections to know this was coming before the rest of us. The debate here isn't even just, were the tariffs fair? The bigger question is, who actually gets to decide this stuff? Under the Constitution, Congress is the one with the keys to the trade toolbox, but Trump used a law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to justify his moves. That law was meant for actual emergencies, like if a hostile nation suddenly cut off our energy supply or tried to freeze US assets. It wasn't designed for a president to wake up one morning and decide the trade balance with Beijing gives him indigestion. Some experts have been flat out mocking the national emergency excuse here. One compared it to panicking over a peanut butter shortage. Sure, it's annoying if it happens, but it's not a national crisis that calls for declaring emergency powers. Unless you're allergic to logic, I guess. Then there's the judge roster. Out of the 11 sitting judges on the federal circuit right now, 8 were picked by Democratic presidents, 0 were appointed by Trump. If you're Donnie Diapers, that's not the bench you want deciding whether your trade war was legal chess or just a toddler flipping the board. And here's the kicker. We're not just talking about loose change. The refund pile is so massive that companies and reportedly certain well-placed individuals might already be positioning themselves to cash in if the ruling goes against Trump's policy. Think hedge funds sniffing around potential payouts. Think insiders making casual phone calls to check in with the right businesses.
Some of which may actually go back to his Commerce Secretary's family business because they're betting against the tariffs too. Statute. We call it the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, also called IEEPA, whether he had the power under IEEPA to do something that the Constitution says is reserved for Congress. You want to do that? You know, we're getting screwed with by OPEC about oil. It's causing a recession. We have to fire back. You can use a fill-in-the-blank sanction. Show me where in the entirety of the IEEPA statute there's a mention of the word tariff being a power of a president.
If you know there's a tsunami of refunds about to hit, why wouldn't you make sure your surfboard is ready? The idea that billions could shuffle around in this way, all because a policy gets struck down, changes how you see the fight. It's not about protecting steel jobs or punishing China anymore. It's about who gets to sit at the table when the refund checks get printed. And let's just say, I'm betting the seating chart doesn't include your average forklift driver or cafe owner. That's why this legal battle is more than dusty paperwork and legal jargon. It's a giant domino game, and when the first one tips, the rest could knock over some very tall stacks of cash. Well-connected players have been here before. If history is any clue, they know exactly how to turn a policy collapse into a personal payday. So the question is, who's in these positions, and how exactly did they line up their chairs just right? Because from the outside, some of them look like they've been smiling through this whole fight, the way you do when you already know the ending will pay you more than the middle ever did. Imagine a football coach screaming at his team to win, but secretly he's put a huge bet on them to lose. That's the kind of suspicion hanging over these tariffs. On the surface, Trump's Commerce Secretary was playing defense for the trade war. Behind the scenes, according to some sources, his own relatives might have been lining up for one of the easiest windfalls in modern politics, buying tariff refund claims for pennies before the courts knocked the tariffs down.
Like another coup-leading president named Bolsonaro. He's not going to be able to go after China and all that money, all that $50-60 billion that came into the U.S. Treasury because of a national security concern. This statute came out of the 1977 Carter era. In fact, as one judge, Judge Reyna, Jimmy Reyna today, pointed out among the 11 judges during oral argument, and of course the answer is there isn't any. And now they focused on emergency. How is this an emergency? Or throw out an entire section of the United States Code, its statute book about trade and tariffs.
Sounds almost too greasy to be true, but the way the system works, it's not even that far-fetched. Here's why. When tariffs get overturned, the importers who paid them are entitled to refunds. The sums aren't small chump change. We're talking tens of billions of dollars already collected, but refunds take time to process. It can be months, sometimes years. Businesses that need immediate cash will often sell their right to those refunds to someone else at a discount. It's like when you're broke and you sell your concert ticket for less than it's worth because you need the money now, not later. And who's waiting around with a fat wallet to buy those claims? The very people in positions to know the likelihood of those refunds happening. Think about it. If you're on the inside, if you've read the briefs, seen the rulings, and heard the whispers in the hallway, you have a much clearer idea of whether those refunds are coming. That's like buying a lottery ticket when you already know the numbers. So claims start trading quietly in this little shadow market, and before the payout even hits, you've locked in huge profits. The business gets their quick cash, you get the full refund later, and the government just becomes the middleman in a massive money shuffle. The Commerce Secretary's family allegedly saw that opportunity and moved in before most people even realized there was a play to be made. Picture a garage sale where the host is smiling sweetly, but secretly hoping their kitchen catches fire so they can cash the insurance check.
It may go up to the United States Supreme Court. We'll talk about that next as well. You're here on the Midas Touch Network. You're with Michael Popok, and a 3-judge panel heard argument as to whether Donald Trump has the power under a 1977 emergency economic, not a tariff, not a reciprocal tariff, not a let's just charge everybody a 16% toll on the highway of commerce tariff. Not that. You have to be able to properly invoke the power. Donald Trump loves emergencies, right? The Alien Enemies Act. We're under attack by Venezuela.
Out front, it's help us win this fight. But behind closed doors, it's and if we lose, here's how we'll cash out. It's grimly efficient. Here's the bigger problem, the conflict of interest. This wasn't some retired official putting a few bucks into a hedge fund. This was the guy front and center for defending tariffs while being tied to people potentially preparing to profit from those same tariffs collapsing. Even if the family's plan was 100% legal under the letter of the law, how does anyone look at that and not gag? It's not just bad optics, it's a straight up test of how far public officials can go before anyone decides it's too far. We've seen this movie before.
A couple of months ago, there were a couple of appeals, a couple of cases. There's not one mention of tariffs as a power under IEEPA. There's sanctions. You want to sanction a foreign country. You know, we have a little thing called the major questions doctrine, which says that if Congress wants to totally turn over a power, and they haven't done that, because that seems to be a major question. So since they haven't done that, to adopt your interpretation, Mr. Shumate, for the United States of America and Donald Trump.
Think back to the 2008 financial crisis, when certain lawmakers were making stock trades based on briefings about the impending crash, while publicly telling everyone the economy was fundamentally strong. Or remember when officials overseeing COVID relief were accused of steering contracts toward friends' companies. Every time it happens, there's a furious few weeks of headlines, some denials, maybe a resignation, and then it fades away. The damage is harder to erase, not just to the bank accounts, but to whatever's left of public trust. When you walk through how this would play out, the numbers get scarier. Let's say an importer is owed $50 million in refunds. They can't wait a year, so they sell their claim for $40 million to an investor. That investor, with inside level confidence about the court outcome, pockets $10 million when the back paychecks clear. Multiply that across dozens or hundreds of claims, and you have a payday worth hundreds of millions flowing to people who never shipped a single container of goods.
Where he fired on the DOJ lawyer, Brett Shumate, trotted out to represent the Department of Justice. He said, show me where I got time. I get to use my powers and you, court, can't review me, let alone have any types of checks and balance. And Judge Dyke, who was appointed by Clinton, said, would mean we just toss out the entire trade system and scheme that Congress put in place off of its Article I powers.
The risk for them is tiny compared to the potential profit. The only thing bigger is the stench. So now, what started as a question about trade policy and presidential power turns into something else entirely. A jackpot that might be sitting there for well-connected insiders, while the general public argues about whether tariffs keep steel plants open. And if people at the top can play both sides, cheering for a win in public, planning for a loss in private, then ask yourself, is this illegal or just really, really convenient timing? Because the line between scandal and smart business looks dangerously thin right here. When the person blowing the whistle is also holding a bet slip, it's hard to believe the game's on the level. In politics, there's a big rule for officials. Avoid even looking like you've got a conflict of interest. Not try to hide it better, but actually avoid it. The rule's there because once people think you're making decisions for your own wallet instead of the country, trust starts leaking out of the system faster than air from a flat tire. And here, we're not talking about some low-level bureaucrat mismanaging the coffee budget. We're talking about the guy defending Trump's tariffs, while people close to him were, according to reports, getting ready to cash in if those tariffs died. That's like the captain of the Titanic handing out life jackets for free, but quietly investing in a life jacket company the week before hitting the iceberg. Out in public, you're telling everyone to stay calm and support the ship's new iceberg repellent. In private, you're counting down the seconds until it all goes sideways because you know who's buying your product. So when Trump's Commerce Secretary was out in front, swearing these tariffs were the right move and part of the great America First strategy, critics now say maybe the slogan meant, my friends' bank accounts first.
Because in order to even if you could use a tariff as a sanction, which is beyond questionable, put everybody in jail without habeas corpus rights or due process. Get them out of the country. And you can't review what I do. Just toss it and give it over to the president. Under an emergency, you'd think they'd express that clearly. Doesn't that seem unusual to you that we would be able to do that, or that it should be done? And of course, they dig in. They press the losing hand every time.
This isn't a new kind of rot. We've seen lawmakers trading shares after closed-door briefings during the 2008 crisis. We saw similar stink with pandemic-era contracts going to suspiciously well-connected companies. It's the same formula every time. Big national problem, public confidence speeches, lots of patriotic noise, followed by the quiet work of friends and family setting themselves up for a payday. Even when nothing illegal gets proven, it still feels like the ref bet on the game. And if you've ever watched sports, you know that once a ref is suspected of betting, nobody trusts the call they make, period. The thing is, proving intent in these situations is like proving someone bought a lottery ticket because they knew the winning numbers. You can't see inside their head. Even if no law technically gets broken, the smell lingers. Watchdogs lose their minds over this stuff because transparency and strict rules around conflicts aren't there to just catch crooks. They're there so the whole process doesn't look like one big inside job. The appearance of impropriety is enough to sink public trust. Once the public thinks the game is rigged, they stop showing up, stop caring, stop participating. Whether the judges kill the tariffs or keep them, the stink doesn't go away. If insiders were set to profit either way, this whole trade war starts looking more like a win-win scheme for Trump's pals. That's why we need actual safeguards. Rules that stop policymakers from secretly betting on the outcomes of their own policies. If the captain's running the Titanic and selling life jackets on the side, maybe we ought to check his bank account. Next time you hear America first, remember, it might actually mean me first, and the rest of us are just paying admission.